Hi, I'm Pastor Cody here at Parker United Methodist Church. This week is our fourth week of Lent, and we've been journeying through this series called Seeking, asking questions in our faith, seeking God in a deeper way, seeking the path of Jesus, seeking to have our eyes opened. And this week, our question is, who sinned? And it is based on the story that comes to us from John chapter 9 about a blind man whose vision is restored, whose eyes are opened. And so the disciples and Jesus are walking and they encounter this blind man who has been blind since birth, who begs for everything that he can get. And people walk by, people have kind of cast him out. And the disciples ask this question: who sinned? Who sinned to cause this man to be blind? What was the sin that happened that is the root of why this man cannot see? Who is to blame? And Jesus, doing what Jesus does, upends the question and asks it in a different way, trying to have the disciples' eyes opened to a new possibility. Not this closed-minded possibility of why, but maybe a broader vision of how God might be moving in the midst of this. It's really a great story. It's a long story, so take time to read it this week, John chapter 9. But in the midst of this, after the question is asked and Jesus responds, Jesus bends down and he picks up some dirt. And he spits into it, and then he makes a mud paste, and he puts it over the blind man's eyes. And then he tells him to go wash. Go wash. And as the blind man goes, having the faith that this paste of mud and spit is going to perhaps do something, he goes having faith and washes, and as the mud comes off, he is healed. This causes a lot of other questions, right? The people who have known this blind man for years and years, this is unexpected. And so the questions just keep coming to this man. They keep coming like, who healed you? How did this happen? And as the blind man is answering the questions as best as he can, nobody wants to take his word for it because it doesn't quite fit in the way in which they understand things. Have you ever had that experience? Have you ever had something happen that kind of challenged you, challenged the way in which you thought the world worked, challenged the way in which you thought faith worked, or just challenged the way in which you saw things, and maybe your eyes were open to a different thing? Or maybe you are like the people that were questioning this man and couldn't quite accept it because it was just so different, so outside of the box. I like to think about how the ways in which we often put our faith in a box, right? The traditions that we've had, the things that we were taught as a child, the ways in which we like to worship, the ways in which we feel like God works, the ways in which everything happens in our world, and we put it in this nice little box, trying to fit everything that we understand and fit everything in which the way we think that faith works, and we put it in a box. The same happens in the church, right? We have ways in which we like to worship. We have ways in which we like to do mission or learn about God or experience God in faith, and we kind of put it in a box, hoping that God shows up because we've done the work of creating this space. What happens a lot of times is when we put all of our stuff and try to tidy it up into a nice little box and we try to put the lid on, it keeps us from being able to grow, right? It keeps things in a contained space, and there's no room for growth. There's no room for understanding beyond. There's no room for God to move. You see, God doesn't work in a nice little box. God likes to push the box lid open and go out and expand, making that love go further than we'd ever imagine, making God's grace known further than we'd ever know. It's hard for us because we like things to be orderly. We like things to be neat. We like to understand all of the ways in which God works. But you see, God is a mystery. God is a mystery. We can't always explain the ways in which God works. It's the same in the story, right? Jesus healed on the Sabbath, which was to the people's understanding against the law. This nice little box that they had built for the laws and the ways in which things should go, Jesus is now operating outside of those spaces. And so they can't quite wrap their minds around it. The religious leaders, some of them are starting to expand their beliefs, maybe trying to figure out, maybe this is the Messiah, maybe this is a man of God. And then you have the others who are strict and like, no, this cannot be because he is breaking the laws. What are the ways in which we need to burst out of our box, to think outside of the box, to see the ways in which God is working that we might not expect? So we've been doing these Lenten classes, and this week in our Sunday evening Lenten class, we asked the question about, have you ever experienced a miracle? Have you ever witnessed a miracle? And the thoughts that came out of that were really eye-opening for me. It made me begin to think about and wonder, how many miracles have I missed? Because I was so focused on the way in which things should work that I had missed the miracle that was happening before my eyes. These people who had known this blind man, some of them missed the miracle. Some of them missed the miracle because things were not as they should be. They weren't following the guidelines or the rules that they had set up, the way in which things were supposed to operate, and they missed the miracle. Instead, they question, right? Who, what, how, why, and they won't accept his answers. They can't accept that maybe, just maybe, they've witnessed a miracle. And so many of them miss it altogether. Through our stuff that we've been working on, one of the pictures that we have been blessed with is this. It's this beautiful picture that was painted for us by Liesl Gwynn Garrity. And she paints this picture to help us reflect and to think about this gospel story and the ways in which this story really threatens the ideas that people have. It shifts the identity of this man in the community. And Liesl Gwynn Garrity asks this question. Instead of asking the questions, why did God heal you? What did you do to cause this? Who sinned? What if the crowd and neighbors would have asked the blind man, how do you feel? What if the man had asked the crowd, what are you afraid of? And what if the Pharisees had asked one another, what if it's time to change? I love asking questions. I think curiosity is one of those skills that is really helpful for us in faith. To not always believe that everything has to operate in a certain way and has to be in a certain box. But perhaps something new is happening. So to be curious, be full of wonder, be looking for the ways in which God is at work, be looking for the new ways in which you might experience God's love, be looking for the miracles that might be before us. So instead of asking those questions, who sinned, or how could this be, or who is the one that did this to you, or how can you be living in this way, or all the questions that we might even ask now, right? Like, why can't you get your life together? Why can't you worship in our space the way that we worship? Why are you still begging and asking for things? Why? Maybe we should come about it with questions of curiosity. How do you feel? How do you see God at work? What are the ways in which you have had life-giving encounters with Jesus? And maybe by asking those questions of curiosity and wonder instead of questions of judgment and rigidity, we might be able to expand our view and see miracles, see life-giving opportunities for us, see the ways in which God is at work outside of the box. And then maybe we'll be able to join in those life-giving moments. Let's change our focus this next week into curiosity and wonder and see where we might experience God in a new way.